There is a silence that follows a man who has lost his gravity. It's not the silence of peace, nor the quiet of wisdom. It's the absence of presence. The void where respect used to live, and most men don't even realize it's gone. Wisdom seekers, let me ask you a question that no one dares to ask you. When was the last time you were truly looked at? Not just seen, but recognized. Not for what you wear, not for what you drive, but for the weight you carry in a room. The seriousness in your spirit. The man you are when no one is watching. You see, there's something ancient that lives inside you. Something that Stoics understood over 2,000 years ago. A kind of quiet force, a moral gravity that bends the world subtly around you. And if you've ever felt it, truly felt it, then you know what I'm talking about. But if that force is gone, if respect seems to slip through your fingers like smoke, there's a reason. And it's more dangerous than failure, or poverty, or weakness. It's a slow erosion of your self-respect. A betrayal that doesn't happen all at once, it happens quietly, through habits. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But what if I told you the enemy of becoming that good man is not in your enemies, not in your environment. It's in the invisible rituals you repeat every day. The 6 silent habits that invite the world to ignore you. Not because they're loud, but because they strip you of the only thing that commands true respect. Your essence. These 6 habits are not just flaws, they are fractures in your character. They make you speak and yet go unheard. They make you act and yet remain unseen. They make you alive and yet invisible. And what's worse, you don't even notice you're doing them. You might dress sharp, work hard, speak with confidence, but still, people interrupt you. They don't listen. They overlook you. You are tolerated, not respected. That's not because you lack strength. It's because you lack alignment with who you were meant to be. This video is not a list. It is a confrontation. It is a descent into the inner habits that fracture the soul of a man. And if you have the courage to face them, you will climb out with something you cannot buy, fake, or borrow. Unshakable respect. Not the kind handed to you by weak men seeking favor, but the kind etched into the way people move around you, the way silence grows when you enter a room, the way the world begins to feel your gravity again. This is Stoicism, not as a trend, but as a weapon, a way of living that puts the soul in order so that the world cannot ignore you. Because in a world obsessed with noise, a man who moves in quiet strength becomes impossible to dismiss. And so now, we begin. Not with motivation, not with hype, but with the first fracture. A habit so widespread, so subtly destructive that it may already live within you. Let's tear it from the root. Habit 1. The habit of self-dismissal. Disrespect does not always arrive as insult. Sometimes it creeps in softly, like fog. No raised voices, no obvious aggression, just a subtle withdrawing from others, a slight hesitation in how they speak to you, a flicker in the eyes that says you do not matter. But here's the bitter truth. Before the world ever dismissed you, you dismissed yourself. That's the first fracture. It's not what you said, it's what you didn't. It's not what you did, it's what you allowed. This habit begins quietly. You don't notice it at first. It's in the way you say sorry when you've done nothing wrong. It's in the way you shrink your opinions so others don't feel uncomfortable. It's in the way you wait, always wait, for permission to speak, to act, to exist fully. A man who dismisses himself teaches others how to treat him. Stoicism teaches us not to chase power, but to embody it, to be rooted in a sense of internal sovereignty that no external force can touch. Yet self-dismissal is a surrender of that sovereignty. It is the slow death of dignity. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can you be master of yourself if you keep giving away your place at the table of your own life? Self-dismissal is not humility. It is not kindness. It is not diplomacy. It is a lie you tell yourself to avoid confrontation. A lie that says, if I am small enough, maybe they will accept me. But men who make themselves small are not loved more deeply. They are forgotten more quickly. This habit poisons your posture. You hunch inward. You fold. Your voice carries no edge. Your gaze lacks anchor. You become like vapor, present but not felt. You're not hated. You're simply bypassed. And what's worse, you begin to justify it. You start to think, I'm just being easygoing. I don't want to be a burden. It's not worth making a fuss. But here's the truth you must confront. If you do not hold the line of your own worth, the world will cross it every single day. There's a certain presence that cannot be faked. It's forged in the crucible of conviction, of a man who knows who he is, what he will tolerate, and what he will never bow to. And when you abandon that line, even once, you invite erosion. First, it's a joke at your expense. You laugh, then it's an ignored opinion. You say nothing, then it's being passed over, talked down to, silenced, and still, you remain quiet. That quiet wisdom seeker is not noble. It is the funeral of your authority. The world respects those who respect themselves with discipline, not those who chase peace by forfeiting their spine. Now here's what the Stoics knew, what you must reclaim. To live with dignity is not to dominate, it is not to shout, it is not to impose, it is to exist without apology. To take up your full space, to speak when it matters, to say no without guilt, to hold silence not as a retreat but as a stance. Self-dismissal kills this. It carves holes into the soul and calls them compromise. It teaches others that your voice is optional, that your values are flexible, that your presence can be edited down to convenience. Do you feel it? That hollow space inside, the one where your inner authority used to live, that's what happens when you dismiss yourself over and over again. But this habit is not permanent. It is a spell, and like any spell, it can be broken. You begin by noticing. Notice the moments you silence yourself. Notice the shrinking, the hesitations, the smile that doesn't belong to you. And in those moments, ask the one question that cuts through fog. Am I abandoning myself right now? If the answer is yes, pause, speak, straighten, return. You owe no apology for being solid. You owe no justification for existing fully. In a world that rewards conformity, your self-respect will be seen as rebellion. Let it be, because the man who refuses to dismiss himself becomes undismissible. His words carry weight, his silence has shape, his presence is a boundary, and in that is the first resurrection of true respect. Habit 2. The habit of leaking energy. Not all weakness is visible. Not all loss can be measured in money, time, or failure. There is a form of quiet poverty that destroys a man from the inside out, one that cannot be seen but only felt. It's the draining of your power through 1,000 invisible cracks, the slow, constant hemorrhaging of your essence, your force, your will. And it all begins with leaking energy, the second silent habit that invites the world to stop taking you seriously. You've seen it in other men, though you may not have known how to name it. They speak, and yet their words feel weightless. They move, but there's no conviction in their steps. They act, but the world remains unaffected, like a feather dropped in a storm. These are not weak men in appearance. They may even appear confident, outwardly busy, social, talkative. But look closer, and you'll see the truth. Their energy has been scattered, their will diluted, their essence fragmented, and so their power forgotten. Stoic philosophy at its deepest level is about containment. It is the cultivation of inner fire, not in bursts, but in form. To be a Stoic is to possess yourself completely, to move through life not flailing, not chasing, but anchored. Epictetus wrote, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He wasn't inviting you to ignorance, he was inviting you to conservation. Because one of the fastest ways to leak your energy is to need to be seen, understood, validated, liked, constantly. You defend every opinion, you explain every move, you worry about every glance, every message, every silence, and in that compulsive outreach, you bleed power. Leaking energy is not just emotional exhaustion, it is a philosophical crisis. It reveals that your center of gravity has shifted away from yourself. You're no longer the source of your own steadiness. You become reactive, pulled into every current, bending under every pressure, drained by every trivial thing. And here's where it gets darker. Every time you respond to something that does not deserve you, every time you give your focus to the petty, every time you engage with the meaningless, you are sending a message to the world. I have nothing sacred to protect. And the world responds by treating you accordingly. This is why some men seem powerful without trying. They don't chase attention. They don't argue in public. They don't over-explain. They don't speak unless there is something that demands their voice. And when they do, people listen, not because they are loud, but because they are whole. They have not leaked themselves out into 1,000 distractions, validations, or meaningless entanglements. Seneca warned of this. He who is everywhere is nowhere. A man whose energy is scattered cannot be respected, not deeply. Because respect is not about being liked or praised, it is about being felt. And that feeling only comes when your inner economy is protected. What does that look like? It looks like discipline, not just in routine, but in attention. It looks like choosing stillness over reaction. It looks like letting people misunderstand you and remaining unmoved. It looks like presence. Not just being somewhere physically, but being entirely there. But leaking energy isn't just about social behavior. It's also about internal habits, the loops of overthinking, regret, fantasy, resentment. Every time you relive a failure, every time you fantasize instead of build, every time you mentally rehearse arguments that will never happen, you're spending real energy on things that produce nothing. And the cost isn't abstract, it's spiritual. You become a man always tired, yet never moving, always occupied yet never progressing, always reaching yet never possessing. The Stoics didn't become unshakable by ignoring pain. They did it by mastering economy. They chose what to care about. They set boundaries not just in action, but in thought. They understood that a man's greatness is not found in what he can hold, but in what he can refuse to carry. This habit of leaking energy is not just inefficient, it is undignified. Because dignity is not found in noise, it is found in depth. And if your mind is constantly in motion, if your attention is always hijacked, if your energy is always at the mercy of your moods and surroundings, then your presence becomes thin, your force translucent, your voice forgettable. So what must be done? Begin by calling your energy home. Withdraw from the places you've spread yourself too thin. Silence what does not serve your depth. Let go of the compulsive need to respond, to explain, to fix, to prove. Every time you don't react, you regain another piece of yourself. Every time you choose stillness over impulsiveness, your center grows stronger. Every time you guard your attention as something sacred, you train the world to see you as sacred too. Because respect is not given to the frantic, it is drawn to the grounded. And grounding comes from one thing: wholeness. So stop scattering, stop bleeding for what will never feed you, and return, fully, silently, without apology, to your inner command post. Because when your energy becomes complete again, so does your presence. And a man who is fully present, fully contained, fully in command of himself, becomes undeniable. Habit 3. The habit of being too available. There is a strange paradox about power. The more of it you truly possess, the less of yourself you offer. Not out of arrogance, not out of cruelty, but because a man of value does not flood the world with his presence, he charges it with his absence. And yet, modern life teaches you the opposite. Be everywhere, be reachable, be responsive, answer every message, show up to everything, say yes to everyone, be available. Because if you're not, you'll be forgotten, right? Wrong. A man who is always available becomes ordinary, and ordinary men are not respected. They're used. This is the third fracture. This is the subtle betrayal of your time, your energy, your worth. To be too available is to offer yourself in such large portions that no one feels the weight of your presence anymore. You become easy to access, easy to interrupt, easy to call upon, easy to ignore. And in a world where attention is currency, you've made yourself cheap. The Stoics taught that your life is your domain, not your schedule, not your calendar, not your inbox, your life. And when you allow that sacred space to be invaded at all hours, for all reasons, you slowly dissolve your own importance in the eyes of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" But you don't. You show up to things that don't deserve you. You answer messages that drain you. You respond out of guilt, not purpose. You say yes when your soul screams no. Why? Because you've been taught that being constantly present makes you reliable. But what it really makes you is dispensable. Because respect is not born from presence alone. It is born from intentional presence. The sun shines every day and people take it for granted. But the moon, with its rare and changing phases, captivates. Why? Because it withholds. It disappears. It returns on its own terms. This is not manipulation. This is spiritual economy. And here's the harsh reality. People do not value what is too easy to access. This applies to your time, your mind, your emotions, your skills, your presence. The man who floods the world with his availability is a man who doesn't know how much he's worth. He gives and gives and gives, and then quietly wonders why no one gives back. He stretches himself thin to be liked, included, seen, and then quietly resents that no one truly respects him. But this is not the fault of the world. It is the result of your own self-neglect, because when you place yourself everywhere, you end up nowhere in particular. The Stoics lived by boundaries, fierce ones, not fences to keep people out, but boundaries to protect the sacred. And what is more sacred than your inner world? Your ability to say no without shame, to withdraw without guilt, to not show up and feel no need to explain why. Seneca in his letters reminds us again and again, you must limit your activities if you wish to live a peaceful life. But modern man lives like a servant, a butler in his own life, opening the door to every request, bowing to every obligation, burning out quietly behind a smile. And every time you do this, every time you make yourself available without discernment, you train people to believe that your time is not yours, that your mind is for rent, that your spirit has no doors. But what if you reclaimed that? What if you decided that your availability was no longer automatic, but earned? What if you saw your time as a temple, and only those with reverence were allowed inside? The first step is silence. Not rudeness, not distance, just silence. Let things go unanswered. Let invitations pass. Let yourself be missed, because a man who is missed is a man who is valued. A man who is always there becomes furniture. And here's something few will ever say to you directly. Scarcity creates power. This is not a trick, it's nature. The rare is respected. The constant is consumed. But to become rare, you must stop fearing what will happen when you disappear. You must stop believing that your worth depends on how much you give. It doesn't. Your worth is not in what you offer. It's in what you protect. When you protect your time, you teach others that your presence is a privilege. When you protect your space, you become a man with walls, with form, with weight. And here's the transformation. When you finally learn to become less available, you become more visible. Not in frequency, but in impact. Because the few times you show up, you are felt. When you speak, you are heard. When you act, it matters. That is the difference between noise and signal. The constantly available man is noise. The discerning man is signal. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs men who are precise, men who are unapologetically selective, men who are not just present but purposeful. So begin the retreat, not to vanish, but to concentrate your power. Let your energy pool. Let your mind clear. Let your presence become rare again. And when you return, return like thunder. Because the man who withholds himself wisely becomes the man the world waits for. Habit 4. The habit of compromising your standards. There is a point in every man's life where he stands at a crossroads, not between right and wrong, but between what he knows is right and what he's willing to settle for. And the moment he steps off his own standard, even by a degree, he becomes something less. This is the 4th fracture. The slow corrosion of character through compromise. Not the bold, dramatic kind, the kind you can name. No, the worst compromises are the silent ones. The ones that happen in the quiet privacy of your mind, with no witnesses but your conscience. You know this habit. You've lived it. It's in saying yes to things you should have said no to. It's in staying in places you've outgrown. It's in laughing along with jokes that violate your values. It's in tolerating behavior, company, habits, relationships that leave you quietly ashamed of yourself. And yet, you allow it. Because it's easier. Because it's more comfortable. Because no one else sees the line you just crossed. But you see it. And once you start crossing your own lines, even just to keep the peace, to not rock the boat, to stay flexible, a new habit forms. A habit that kills respect at the root. You begin to abandon your standards in the name of survival. And the world takes note. You think people don't notice, but they do. They see the way you let things slide. They feel the hesitation in your voice. They smell the rot of self-betrayal, even if they can't name it. You become the man who can be bent, the man who can be talked down, the man who will betray his own principles for the sake of comfort or approval. And nothing invites more disrespect than that. Because men who compromise their standards are men who cannot be trusted. And that includes trusting themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter." And yet, how often do you sacrifice the right thing for something that feels easier in the moment? How often do you negotiate with your own inner judge? Just this once. It's not that bad. Everyone else is doing it. But here's the truth you already know. Every time you violate your standard, you shrink. And the worst part, you begin to lose track of what your standards even were. What once felt sacred becomes flexible. What once was a clear no becomes a maybe. And one day you wake up and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Stoicism teaches that virtue is the highest good, not victory, not pleasure, not reputation. Virtue, the alignment between what you believe and how you live. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." This is the role of your standards, to give you adversity, to give you a mountain inside your own character that you refuse to come down from. But modern life mocks standards. You're told to be more understanding, more open-minded, more easygoing. But understand this. There is a difference between being kind and being spineless. There is a difference between being patient and being passive. There is a difference between being adaptable and being formless. A man without standards becomes like water poured into whatever shape life hands him. But a true Stoic is not water. He is stone, not immovable by ignorance or pride, but immovable in principle. And this is where respect is born, because people do not respect men who say yes to everything. They respect the man who knows where the line is drawn and does not cross it. The man who walks away from comfort if it means compromising his values. The man who chooses tension over betrayal. The man who says no, even if it costs him everything. Because what he protects is not visible, but eternal. And here's what you must remember, wisdom seeker. Every compromise you make echoes, not in the ears of the world, but in your own soul. Every time you allow what you know is wrong, every time you lower your expectations to avoid conflict, every time you remain silent when you should speak, you lose a piece of your crown. And the more pieces you lose, the more the world forgets you ever wore one. But that crown can be reforged, and it begins here, by remembering the man you said you would be when no one was watching. By remembering that your standards are not rules, they are reflections of your dignity. You are not here to be agreeable. You are not here to fit in. You are not here to keep the peace at the cost of your soul. You are here to live with alignment. And alignment is expensive. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you ease. It will cost you popularity. But it will give you back everything that matters. Your clarity, your respect, your peace. So return to your code. Remember your inner law, and let no one, not even you, drag you beneath it, because the man who honors his own standards is a man the world cannot help but respect. Habit 5. The habit of talking too much. There is a sacred weight in silence, a power that modern man has almost completely forgotten. He fills every space with sound, opinions, stories, advice, emotions, predictions, jokes, explanations, excuses. He becomes a man of words, but not a man of meaning. This is the 5th fracture, the habit of talking too much. And it is not a small weakness. It is a slow leak of masculine authority, a dissolving of presence, a betrayal of the sacred space where clarity, restraint, and command are born. You see, words are not free. They cost energy, they cost credibility, they cost attention. And when they are used recklessly, they do more than just annoy people, they weaken you. Because the more you speak, the more likely you are to reveal your uncertainty. The more you explain, the more you confess that your presence alone is not enough. The more you react with words, the more you surrender your center. The Stoics knew this deeply. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Not because listening is polite, but because listening is a discipline of dominance. The man who talks constantly is trying to convince the world. The man who listens deeply is already convinced of who he is. But this habit, this compulsion to speak, is seductive. It makes you feel important. It gives the illusion of control. It helps you fill the unbearable silence that exposes your inner chaos. And yet, look at the men who hold true respect. They do not talk just to talk. They do not explain what doesn't need explanation. They do not argue with fools. They do not broadcast their plans. They do not narrate their every move. Because they understand a brutal truth. The more you say, the less you're heard. Seneca said, "Speech that's overlong is but a noise." But that's what most men have become, noise. walking monologues, fountains of opinions, complaints, flattery, self-praise, and empty advice. They speak as if they're afraid of being forgotten. They talk to prove their intelligence. They talk to fill the gaps where confidence should be. But the man of true power knows. Mystery multiplies authority. The man who leaves some things unsaid, who doesn't speak at every opportunity, who speaks last, not first, is the one the room watches when he finally opens his mouth. Why? Because restraint is rare. Because silence requires self-possession. Because when a man speaks after he has listened, his words carry the weight of presence, not performance. There's another reason this habit kills respect. When you talk too much, you reveal too much of yourself too quickly. And what is given too quickly is rarely valued. Your struggles, your victories, your plans, your principles, if they are all laid bare within minutes of knowing someone, you've already cheapened them. Not everything you think deserves to be shared. Not every opinion you hold deserves to be heard. Not every emotion you feel deserves an audience. Because when you speak without discipline, you scatter your essence across the ground like coins in the street, and the world will treat you accordingly. But there is another path. The path of the measured man, the grounded man, the man whose words are few but chosen. He understands that silence is not empty. It is full of intent. It is the container in which power builds. It is the pause before the strike. It is the breath before the truth. He understands that when you speak only when it matters, people listen not because you demand it, but because you've earned it. This isn't about being silent all the time. It's about speaking with precision. It's about cutting through the fog of endless noise with one word that lands like thunder. It's about being the kind of man who doesn't just say what he believes, but embodies it so deeply, words are almost unnecessary. That's real Stoicism, not cold detachment, but disciplined expression. A sword is respected not because it is always drawn, but because it is known to be lethal when it is. Your voice is no different. So here is your challenge. Let others explain. Let others overshare. Let others narrate their identity. You remain rooted. You speak like a man who has thought 10 times before opening his mouth. You speak like a man whose silence is never empty. You speak like a man who knows that every word is a weapon and wields it with the precision of a warrior, not the clumsiness of a boy. Because when you learn to stop talking so much, you will discover something extraordinary. You don't lose influence. You gain gravity. And gravity is the secret to presence. Speak less, mean more, and the world will lean in to hear you. Habit 6, the habit of seeking approval. There is no chain heavier than the invisible need to be liked. And yet, this is the chain most men wear from the moment they are boys. It grows with them, silently, constantly, until it becomes so familiar they mistake it for their own nature. And they walk through life with their heads bowed, asking the world for permission to be themselves. This is the 6th and most dangerous habit, the habit of seeking approval. At first, it seems harmless, natural even. A little nod of validation here, a compliment there, a reassuring look that says, you're good enough. But over time, the man begins to crave it, to need it, to shape himself around it. And what begins as a desire for connection becomes a prison of dependence. Soon, the man cannot move unless someone is watching. He cannot speak unless someone claps. He cannot stand unless someone first gives him their blessing. This is not confidence, it's camouflage. Because when a man's sense of self is rooted in how others see him, he is never truly standing, he is always posing. This is how self-respect dies. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in small, daily betrayals where a man edits himself just to be accepted. He tones down his strength, he quiets his truth, he reshapes his opinions like wet clay to match the room he's in. And in doing so, he becomes a mirror, reflecting what others want to see, but forgetting what he looks like. This habit poisons everything. It poisons relationships, because the man can't love without needing to be loved back in a specific way. It poisons ambition, because the man only moves toward what he thinks others will praise. It poisons integrity, because the man will betray his own values to avoid discomfort or disapproval. Seneca said, "If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich." Understand what he's saying. When you live by the opinions of others, you will always be in debt. Emotional debt, You will seek from others what you have failed to build within yourself, and the more you seek it, the further you drift from your own center. This is not humility. This is not connection. This is spiritual servitude. And here's the devastating truth. People do not respect the man who needs their approval. They may like him. They may even admire his kindness, his cooperation, his charm. But they will not follow him. They will not trust him. Because deep down they can feel it. He is not rooted in himself. He is renting his identity from the people around him. And the rent is due every time someone frowns, disagrees, or pulls away. But the Stoic lives differently. The Stoic moves inward. He does not hate the world. He does not shut people out. But he does not need their applause to act. He has become what the ancients called autarkes, self-governing, whole, complete in himself. This doesn't mean cold detachment. It means strength that does not beg for recognition. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, surrounded by flatterers and enemies alike, wrote, "The approval of others, it is a distraction. What matters is to be in alignment with nature and your own reason." What he meant is this: if you live your life always chasing approval, you will never become yourself. You will become a patchwork of other people's expectations, a mask, a pleasing lie, a ghost. And ghosts are not respected. They are pitied. But here's the turning point. You do not have to become someone the world likes. You must become someone you cannot betray. And to do that, you must break the habit of needing to be liked. That means saying things others won't agree with and standing tall anyway. That means walking away from people who only love the version of you that pleases them. That means creating your path without waiting for permission, applause, or consensus. That means replacing the question, "What will they think of me?" with the question, "What would my highest self think of me?" This shift, this single shift, is liberation. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you start gathering respect, not because you demand it, but because people finally see a man who cannot be moved by public weather. A man who does not shrink or swell based on who's watching. A man who stands the same, whether surrounded by applause, silence, or criticism. That is presence. That is gravity. That is leadership. Because people do not follow the man who needs them. They follow the man who doesn't. The man who has something greater within him than their opinion. And so, wisdom seeker, if you've recognized this habit in yourself, good. That's where power begins. In recognition. In confrontation. Not in shame, not in guilt, but in clarity. You cannot serve two masters, approval and truth. Choose truth. Let your silence speak louder than flattery. Let your consistency speak louder than compliments. Let your solitude speak louder than applause. And walk like a man who has already been accepted, not by the world, but by himself. Because the world does not respect the man who begs for love. It respects the man who is love, embodied in discipline. Let that be your law now. Not performance, not posing, not pleasing, but presence, power, peace.